Welcome to today's lesson. Today's lesson is about amphibians. And so in this picture here, we have three different types of poison dart frogs. Poison dart frogs are some of the more poisonous frogs in the planet. The three examples that you see here can be found in Central and South America. We have a lot of poison dart frogs in Costa Rica. They are called poison dart frogs because their poison was extracted by the indigenous people and put in their darts for battle and for fighting. One of these poison dart frogs can actually, the golden one, can actually have enough venom to kill 10 men. Okay, some defining characteristics about amphibians. You notice that now they are in the category of having limbs. So amphibians have limbs, but notice that they do not have amniotic egg. And we're going to talk more about amniotic egg in more detail, but just know that your amniotic egg is an egg with amniotic fluid, which is found inside the egg. And amphibians don't have this adaptation. So what happens is their eggs will dry out if they are not underwater. This causes amphibians to have to lay their eggs in an aquatic environment. So one of the adaptations that has come into play because of the fact that amphibians have to depend on water is other characteristics that we'll discuss in a moment. Amphibians are, there's different types of amphibians. So they are frogs and toads that you can see here. We have a big issue in the Tampa Bay area with some invasive species. This is the cane toad, which is a terrible invasive species in Florida. Invasive species are a problem because these types of frogs will come and eat the native frogs, causing the native frogs to go into extinction. The next organisms are salamanders. That you can see, this one here is a tiger salamander that lives in the east coast of Florida. And there's these are Sicilians. I'm sorry, these are newts. This is an example of a newt, and then this is a Sicilian. You probably have never heard of Sicilians, but they live underground. They're very difficult to find. Most of them they look snake-like or worm-like. They have skin over their eyes because they live underground. They don't need light to see, so they could actually be they could not see outside in the light. They don't have, their eyes do not permit them to do that. So one of those adaptations of having to lay eggs underwater causes these organisms to have another adaptation called metamorphosis. Metamorphosis is the process of the changing basically from eggs into adulthood. There is two distinct phases that these organisms have to go through in order to become adults. So the distinct phases, the first phase that they go through is the tadpole phase, which is the immature phase, and it occurs in water. And the second phase is the adult phase, which is when they're full grown, basically, an adult. In this case, it would be the frog would be the adult phase, and the tadpole would be the immature phase. Notice there are stages in between, but the two distinct phases is the tadpole phase and the frog phase. A couple of other things, interesting things that happen, that because they have to go through this process of metamorphosis, and some insects have to go through metamorphosis too. So they're not the only organism, but they definitely all, they do have to go through metamorphosis. So one of the other characteristics that happens in metamorphosis is there's a few changes. The respiratory system is one of those systems that change dramatically. You see this tadpole here? This tadpole has these things here coming out. They are external gills. They're usually found in the immature stages because they live, usually the tadpoles live in water. And then by the time they become adults, they live on land, so they need lungs. So here's a tadpole with the gills, and here are the lungs that the frog, basically these gills become lungs in the metamorphosis transformation. They also have the ability to have very thin skin, and this very thin skin allows them to have gas exchange through their skin as well as their lungs. So their lungs are not the only way that they can get gas exchange. This picture here is a picture of an axolotl, and this organism is also part of the amphibian world. And when they become adults, they keep their gills. And so notice here they have gills and they have lungs that allows them to live in land as well as in water. Another interesting adaptation that amphibians have to go through is their sensory adaptations, because they have to be able to live in two environments. The first adaptation that we're going to talk about is the nictitating membrane. Nictitating membrane can be found in the eye. So notice this is the eye for land, and this eye is very similar to ours. And notice this membrane is like an additional shade that goes over the eye. As you can imagine your eye going into the water without goggles, right? Your eyes sting. You don't have a clear vision. The moment you put your goggles on, you're able to see a lot better. This nictitating membrane works like their own built-in goggles, where the membrane comes up and it allows them to see underwater. The other adaptation that they have is a tympanic membrane. A tympanic membrane has to do with the ear development. So notice here, this is what your ear, very similar to this, is what your ear looks like. The sound comes in and it bounces off here, and that's how you hear the sound in your ear. So in amphibians, the tympanic membrane is on the outside, so there's no perforation on the inside of the membrane. Another interesting characteristics about amphibians is that they're ectotherms. Ectotherms are organisms that depend on their surrounding environment for their temperature. So they cannot exercise a bunch and be warm. If they exercise, their temperature, their body temperature stays the same. Their body temperature is controlled by their environment. So if it's warm outside, they're going to be warm. If it's cold outside, they're going to be cold. This gives them two situations to be in. The first one is they have to choose where to go to live. They have to live in environments where they're going to be, if it's too cold, they can go to a place where it's warm. The other thing that allows them, or that causes for them, is that they become very active at night. During the day, it gets hot, you lose a lot of moisture, you can get dehydrated. So usually they sleep during the day and they become active at night when the temperature is cooler, and they can go out and hunt or become more active. They could freeze to death. So being environments, you would not find many amphibians in really cold environments. Okay, one important thing that you should know about amphibians is that they are species indicators for the environment. Species indicators are organisms, if you remember, like moths, that give scientists a good sense of how the environmental conditions are in that location. And some of their adaptations allow them to become species indicators. And that has caused, as we're going through our sixth mass extinction, amphibians are in the forefront, or one of the species that are losing the most amount of organisms. And that is because of a few things. This here is a chytrid fungus. If you remember the chytrid fungus, they can be these organisms, because they have thin skin, they are very sensitive to this fungus, and the fungus will kill significant numbers of them. Pollution in the earth is also causing the pollution to filter through their skin and poison them. And the climate change, the warming and cooling of the climate, and the changes in temperatures causes, because they're ectoderms, causes a significant impact on their livelihood as well as habitat loss. Because these organisms need to live in water and land, they marshes or places where there's some water access are beneficial. But these are the kinds of places where man are now extending urbanization. So, like, for example, if you go to Pasco County, there were a lot of areas where there were retention ponds and water areas where you had a lot of greenery, and they're tearing all of that up, filling it with dirt to build more homes. So all of this is causing a significant extension of their habitat loss, because now they have no places to live, as well as sensitivity in the environment from pollution. Okay, that's our amphibian lesson for today. There is a brief dissection that you will be doing. It's a virtual dissection, just so that you can get a sense of some of their body parts, and you have questions that you need to answer.